This is part 2 of mistakes in practice from Zen Mind Beginner's Mind, which is in part 2 under right attitude. As you may remember from last week, the big mistake he was talking about is what? The idealized self in practice. And basically, you just keep on practicing. So as long as you continue your practice, you're quite safe. But as it is very difficult to continue, you must find some way to encourage yourself. As it is hard to encourage yourself without becoming involved in some poor kind of practice, to continue a pure practice by yourself may be rather difficult. This is why we have a teacher. With your teacher, you will correct your practice. Of course, you will have a very hard time with him, her, or they, but even so, you will always be safe from wrong practice. Now he's saying most Zen Buddhist priests have had a difficult time with their masters. Okay, first of all, in Zen practice, your teacher is your master. Many of you have taken the precept study with me know that broadly, there are 3 ways that teachers are presented. And very broadly, as I see it in North America, perhaps we could say the West, is in the American Insight tradition, not Insight or Theravada tradition in Asia, as I have experienced it, which is minimal, to be sure, and only in Thailand, is that your teacher is your Kalyana Mitra, your spiritual friend. In Soto Zen, your teacher is your master. And in fact, technically that's why a teacher is called a Zen master, because they have mastered the practice. And so okay, I'll move on and then I'll say why the difference. Then in the Vajrayana tradition, your teacher is your guru. And the variation is that how much we just talked about, and I think to me really plays out, though I have very little experience with Vajrayana. I have no practice experience with Vajrayana, just have friends who do Vajrayana practice, teacher friends too. So in the American Insight tradition, they're like your friend, and you publicly, it's actually really difficult in my experience to know what a teacher is, but mostly you just see the teacher in retreat for 15 minutes every other day. So, and there's a real emphasis on maybe more of a Sangha mates. Maybe that's also part of it. Though, I'm sure there are different kinds of teachers, just like in any situation. In Zen, which of course I'm most familiar with, your teacher is your master because they have mastered the practice. And so they are, myself included, responsible for your practice. And so it's a relationship that's much more about mutuality. And there is very much a sense of authority and a sense of giving over of the student to be guided in practice. Right, not just, and I'll say more here in a minute. So actually, I'll say it now. Your teacher in Zen, I am not your friend. I'll say it again. I am not your friend. I am friendly to you, and we may do things that are friendly, and we, at times, may even, say things that are very friend-ish, and behave in friend-ish way. And in fact, in the monastic practice, we do everything together. You shit together, you eat together, you sleep together, in the very traditional way. Literally the monks, and he does talk about monks here, sleep in the zendo. That's why it's so long. If you've been to Green Gulch Farm, it's a little longer than a typical, but it's a whole length of a tatami mat and then boards on both ends. And so monks literally sleep in there. And then nuns are asleep in the Nisodo, which is next or down the way. But you only get a tatami mat and a half, which is about the same length as in the Zendo. So, yeah, sleep, bathe together. We do, but by gender separation, and also by seniority. The abbot goes first, then down, right? So you do need to give over to the teacher to guide you. So this is, in a certain way, it's a difficult practice for us in the West who are very taught to be very independent, and I think for those of us who have backgrounds, a cultural background of less independence, in the setting of the dominant culture of complete independence, or 99.99% in my estimation, it can be a real conflict also, a different kind of conflict. Now, in the Vajrayana tradition, the teacher is your guru, which means they are responsible for you in all your lifetimes. All your lifetimes. And so that is a huge amount. I am sorry, but I don't know how to be responsible for you in all your lifetimes. I will highly admit to that. So if you want me to be responsible for all your lifetime, we're going to have to talk about it, because I would just have to try and figure it out with you. Okay? Because I have not been trained in that way. I am willing to be responsible for you in this lifetime. I do hold general responsibility for you and all the containers of practice. However, as many of you know who've taken the precepts with me, it's a very different thing too. And then if you're going to become a student who teaches under me, which is part of the app training, then that also calls for another degree of mutuality and building of trust. Essentially, that's one way that I would put it, and intimacy. Zen is so into intimacy. It's actually considered the ultimate, you could say, of Zen, is truly intimacy, because it gives us a way of how to be intimate with all things, all being. The relationship between student and teacher is, a petri dish for how you would relate with any other being. And actually, in Dogen way, would be with walls and trees and tiles and pebbles, which is another talk altogether. So, therefore, imagine that kind of connection. You will, and priest means you've asked someone to be your teacher, not just as lay, but in Japan, to ask someone to be your teacher as a priest, they don't skip around. And so the Shunryu Suzuki lineage, we don't skip around so much once you ask someone to be a teacher, but it still happens. In Japan, it hardly ever happens. It's very much a commitment, right? So imagine that kind of intimacy, that kind of commitment will bring conflict, will bring, right? Just in like any marriage or anything in which you make a vow to someone. Good friendships are like that, right? Living households are like that. So it's going to arise. And in fact, as many of you know who've taken the precepts, the lay precepts with me, actually all of you have only taken the lay precepts with me, so that I say this is when your practice really begins. And at times that when you have a conflict with me, actually, that's when your practice really begins also, because how we resolve things is part of practice. And in fact, you could say all of practice, because when it's easy. When it's not easy, that's where we really get to see our karmic habitual pattern and how do we work with that, and how do we work with that together, separately and together. When they talk about the difficulties, you may think that without this kind of hardship, you cannot practice Zazen. But this is not true. Whether you have difficulties in your practice or not, as long as you continue it, you have pure practice in its true sense. Even when you are not aware of it, you have it. So Dogen Zenji, the founder of Soto Zen, said, do not think you will necessarily be aware of your own enlightenment. Whether or not you're aware of it, you have your own true enlightenment within your practice. So 2 parts here. In the koan writings in particular, a lot of stories of Zen teacher and master. Most koan stories are about teachers and masters. Teachers and students, right? So their noses are being twisted, sticks are you're being hit, you're being yelled at, you're being told to leave, all sorts of extreme things, and the mythology of Zen and Rinzai Zen in particular, but pretty much all of Chinese Zen, of olden Zen, of true Zen, some people would like to say the golden age of Zen, is this very verbose and very big sense of conflict or some kind of that then brings the student to enlightenment. So, but he's saying here that actually, so yes, you should have difficulty with your teacher, your master, but you don't have to have them, right? So again, also really big in Zen is that the teachings is just a finger pointing at the moon. Anything, I say is already a mistake, right? Because then if you solidify around it, like, oh, you might think, oh gosh, I know Reverend Lien has a lot of trouble with blah, 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 blah. Wow, their relationship must be better than our relationship because we never fight about anything. Or you're like, oh, how do I fight with her now? Because that means we're going to be more intimate. No, right? It just means that we should expect difficulty if we're going to have intimacy. But we don't have to have difficulty. In fact, it doesn't make it better that we have difficulties. So we also want to, and actually that's a way of talking about your karmic habitual tendency, right? Because we will bring, the difficulty, of course, is not just mine, the teacher. The difficulty is what each of us bring. And so we want to watch that, right? We don't have to keep on continuing our habitual tendency, right? And so it could happen, but it doesn't have to happen. Also, we want to watch how it happens. And regardless of that, you continue practice. This is, again, it's actually, to me, it's actually saying, don't be afraid of conflict. It's going to happen when you want to be intimate with someone or others, right? Maybe you're already having, I'm sure those of you have been in practice for a while, I'm sure you had some KM buddies that you're just like, well, right? And if you don't, that's okay. But working through them or being with them, we don't even sometimes have to work through it. I've talked about, I think last week, about how sometimes it just shifts by what was part of today's meditation, presence, showing up, being with each other, and still practicing with each other, right? Allowing for shifts to happen. They don't all have to be manipulated, control shifts, or, some enlightenment happenings. Just showing up and being together is the most important thing in Zen. And thank you to you all. And many of you expressed that, how happy you are to be here, despite tiredness, overfullness, whatever, right? Difficulty, bad news, all sorts of things. So yay. All right. Oh, and also the last part here is really important. Oh, yes. Do not think you will necessarily be aware of your own enlightenment. That's the same as Dogen in, I'm pretty sure it's the Genjo Koan, when he says, those who are deluded, those who think they are enlightened are deluded, and those who are deluded are enlightened. In fact, when you think you're enlightened, that's when you should you're probably having a problem. And part of the teacher's role is actually not to, part of the Zen teacher, I'll say it as a Zen teacher rule, this is my take, is that actually not to get you to enlightenment or specifically to tell you that you're enlightened. And the reason for that is not that we're, mean and we don't want to encourage you, but we tend to then, our ego, right, arises, one. Two, we grasp on to what is enlightenment. And there's no one enlightenment, right? The great enlightenment is not a thing that you become. It's just a sense of awareness of the vastness of possibility and the wherewithal of it. Now that's hard to hold constantly. So we don't talk about enlightenment a lot because it tends to concretize around it. And also that's where we start judging, right? If that means enlightenment and that monk could do it, or none, I'm using monk genderlessly, then, if I don't do it, then I'm not enlightened. And which is, by the way, why Mahayana became a louder voice, is because historically in the Theravada tradition, only certain monks can do certain practices or considered enlightened. And so the Mahayana's voice was like, no, we're already enlightened. What is it that gets in the way? Which includes, by the way, all meaning, and very specifically then that women are also enlightened and lay people are also enlightened. Okay. All right. Okay. Another mistake will be to practice for the sake of the joy you find in it. Actually, when your practice is involved in a feeling of joy, it is not in very good shape either. Of course, this is not poor practice, but compared to the true practice, it is not so good. All right, and the reason for that is, it's not that we, you just gotta have hard suffering practice or else you're not practicing correctly. No, it just means when you are always looking for pleasure or the calmness, whatever you find as pleasant. And again, I'll just say, no one escapes that thing where like, oh, this was a good meditation period. Because mostly, I have never had a PD where someone said, oh, that was like, well, maybe variation, but not outright like, oh, I had a difficult period and that was so enjoyable. I can't wait for the next one. You might say, oh, it's really hard and I learned this X, Y, and Z, but most of us determine good as time passed quickly, my body was easeful, my emotion was easeful, my thoughts were easeful. Isn't that right? That's a good retreat too, most of us think. Or we had some shift in which we had a lot of ease. It's just our way towards pleasure, but we can't, and we cannot keep on using that as an evaluation of the quality of our practice, right? Because like any relationship, practice, by the way, is a relationship. It's a relationship with yourself foremost, because that's who you're with. Hours on end, 24/7. Maybe you guys, okay, 26 and a half because of that half hour of binging on whatever Netflix or whatever. Maybe you escaped yourself a little bit. Or maybe actually, to be perfectly honest, probably most of us, 23 and a half hours of a day, we are not paying attention. But maybe that's just me. All right, so the mistake is only to look for joy or the easefulness of practice. By the way, he talks about it as one-sided too. So when you just keep it at one-sided. Here we go. In Hinayana Buddhism, the practice is classified in 4 ways. The best way is just to do it without any joy in it, not even spiritual joy. This way is just to do it. Forgetting your physical and mental feeling, forgetting all about yourself in your practice. This is the fourth stage, or the highest stage. The next stage, I lost my place. The next highest stage is to have just physical joy in your practice. At this stage, you find some pleasure in practice, and you will practice because of the pleasure you find in it. Okay, this is very, very specific. So the four stages are, so the highest is the fourth. By the way, what is that one? Shikantaza! Or actually as Gil has proposed, the highest state of mindfulness practice, right? Because you just do it, right? You're just doing it. You're completely with it. And it's not about good or bad, right or wrong. You're with things completely. And that's technically what Zazen is, which is why I say most of us don't really do Zazen when we're sitting. You're just with things completely as they are. There's good or bad, you're just with it. You're a buddy with it constantly. Okay. The next high stage, or the third stage, is to just have physical joy in your practice. At this stage, you find some pleasure in practice, and you will practice because of the pleasure you find in it. This is actually talking about the jhana states. In Theravada practice, you practice jhana states because they are considered the states to replace worldly pleasure. Very specifically, to replace worldly pleasure. But what happens then? When you get off the cushion or away from your retreat, everything will come back. Jhana states are not forever. They're just that, states. But they're a very definite state that certain things happen, including, I think there's one in here. Well, maybe they didn't talk about it, but there is one in which, actually later, I'll talk about it. All right. And so part of it is you feel a certain state in jhana, which some of you have experienced, all of us will experience when you do in a 7-day meditation, you'll get it. You can even get it in a 1 day. Remember that piti. Piti is a jhana state in which literally things feel light. There's a brightness usually. Almost all of you have achieved it already at some point, especially on a retreat. I can almost guarantee it in a 7-day, right? But don't, I didn't sell you anything now. All right. So, but that state, it's good because it helps us to come back. But if we cling to it, we don't advance, right? We don't get to other states of awareness. But it is a good feeling, and it's actually a really hard one to not grasp. I work at it every retreat because I love it. Even when I work not to love it, I love it. And who wouldn't? You feel light. The next stage, you feel happy and tranquil and then happy. Those are, for most of us, really pleasant states. So they're very hard. And that's why it is to replace so that you have a sense. This is why people go back on retreat. Who goes back on retreat for the first 3 days where it's all like pain and suffering? We don't want that concentration state in which we're like, yeah, I got ease, right? And so it's going to happen. And when we attach to it, it's not going to let us have awareness in other ways, right? In the higher state, which is you're just with things as they are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you do get to that. You can certainly get to that. All right. The second stage, you have both mental and physical joy or good feeling. Oh, that's the piti I'm talking about. The second stage of jhana practice. These two middle stages are stages in which you practice zazen because you feel good in your practice. All right, it's true. Yeah. The first stage is when you have no thinking and no curiosity in your practice. Now you might read that. I'll read that again. The first stage is when you have no thinking and no curiosity in your practice. You're like, what? That's the lowest state? Has no thinking? I haven't achieved that one. You think that would be the highest state, right? Where's I have a note here for it. H. Well, I know what I wanted to say about it. This is my problem with my notes. Oh yeah, H. Where's H? Here it is. By the way, I think he means no thinking here as that state we've been talking about called clear comprehension. When body and mind are not struggling. It's not that you don't have thinking, you just don't struggle with your thinking. That's a kind of non-thinking. Maybe a better translation here would be non-thinking. It's not that you don't have thoughts, you just don't struggle with them. And what about no curiosity in your practice? Here I think he means no curiosity as no expectation, right? Not as in the curiosity we talk about as a field of awareness that's open and allowing. And by the way, we use the word curiosity as a finger pointing at the moon, do you know? Because we can become overly curious. Piti actually is an over curiosity of the light state, of the light states. So the first stage is when you're driven just by your habitual tendency. Another way to think about it is you're not having clear comprehension of what you're doing. It's not skillful thinking. It's the habitual thinking. And then you don't have curiosity. Why? Because you're driven by your habitual tendency. I have to achieve. I have to be a good meditator. I have to be the bad meditator. Some of us come and say, I'm the worst one. I'm the worst one, right? Or I'm the, mediocre one. I try, but I can't seem to get more and I can't seem to get worse. Whatever thing we bring as what we think practice should be or how we should be in practice, that's the first stage. And that's, all right, isn't it? Isn't it? These 4 stages also apply to our Mahayana practice. And the highest is just to practice it. If you find some difficulty in your practice, that is the warning that you have some wrong idea. So you have to be careful. But do not give up your practice. Continue it, knowing your weakness. Here, there's no gaining idea. Here, there's no fixed idea of attainment. You do not say, this is enlightenment, or that is not right practice. Even in wrong practice, when you realize it and continue, there is right practice. Okay, a lot here. Our practice cannot be perfect, but without being discouraged by this, we should continue. This is the secret of practice. There's a lot in this paragraph. One is, before in the beginning, it said, right? Wrong practice to always think of it as joyful. Here he's saying, if you have difficulty in your practice, that's a warning. So any grasping, right? Greed or hatred or delusion is still one of the 3 poisons. Now, by the way, it doesn't mean it's a better practice when you don't have those. What is he saying? Despite those, you keep on practicing. And the despite is actually hopefully become despite not as, fuck that, I'm going to practice anyways, right? So that's aversion and aggressiveness to it. Or how do okay, I'll leave it at that. It is about like the buddy. By the way, I just literally made it up tonight, the blue sky buddy practice, but it seems to work, didn't it? It's like, it's a buddy, right? Like, can you just stay with it? Be with it. Really, a friend is one who shows up for you. Yes, friendship is, all of us can't help it. We like to give advice. We like to fix things for our friends, fix them sometimes. That's what good friends are. I fix you, right? No, I'm kidding, right? A good friend is one who can be with you completely and know when to shut up and just be with you. Don't need advice, don't need fixing. Sometimes I need holding, true. Allowing is a kind of holding. You know, when they teach people in Zen hospice, it's all about being present with people. That's the most important thing that they're teaching in Zen hospice. So we keep going. We do not give up your practice, continue it, knowing your weakness. Here, there is no gaining idea. By the way, here, on one level, yes, we continue and we try not to have gaining idea. You could read that as that. I also read it as here, there's no gaining idea. When you are in the present, there's no comparison. When you're completely in the present, there's nothing to compare to. There's no past, there's no future, there's no up, there's no down, there's no right, there's no wrong. There's no good me or bad me, good you or bad you. When you're completely present, then things are, and are with things as they are. Most of us, when we're completely present, there is a sense of things are as they are. I have to take my word for it. See if that's true for you. Here, there's no fixed idea of attainment. Right? That's how you don't have judgment. By judgment, I don't mean just bad judgment, just evaluative judgment. You do not say this is enlightenment or this is not right practice. Even in wrong practice, when you realize it and continue, both of those go together, there is right practice. Our practice cannot be perfect, but without being discouraged by this, we should continue it. This is the secret of practice. What's the secret of practice? Yes, Myoshin.
Continuing even if you make mistakes or something happens.
Or the shortened version, continue. Or another wording from another teacher, start again. You're going on Goenka retreat, start again. Just start again. We just practice. We just practice. And that's hard, right? Remember, constancy is the hardest thing in practice. And another way to think of constancy is just starting again in every moment. And in fact, technically, every moment you are starting again, by the way. Maybe part of practice is not doing starting again, just being starting again. Allow yourself to just start again. Quiet that judging mind and just start again, wherever you are. Oh, here I have this as my notes is ding ding. And if you want to find some encouragement in your discouragement, I love that. And when you if you want to find some encouragement in your discouragement, getting tired of practice is itself the encouragement. Wow. I like that. You encourage yourself when you get tired of it. Remember I tell you, Zen Mind Beginner's Mind sounds really simple, and really lots of stuff here. You encourage yourself when you get tired of it. You can read that as, when I'm tired of it, how do I encourage myself to keep going? I think that's a good read. What's another read? I would also read it as, when we get tired of our coping mechanism, all the shit that we bring to try to manipulate reality, including this one or that one, as it is, when we're tired of that, then that's encouragement. It actually is encouragement. So this is why, again, like when you come to practice, like the 5 hindrances, you're like, oh, I'm not hindrance. Oh, no, I'm not hindrance. Oh, no, I'm not hindrance, right? Like in the class, you're all like, can I have more than one hindrance? Because I'm feeling them all, right? On a certain level, that's because you're starting, when you start to become aware of something, in a way, we have to continue practice because it will overwhelm us. It will, because you're like, shit, I gotta look at suffering. It just seems so much. So this is why we also have to practice regulating, and there are tools for it, without a doubt. And when we're able to get tired of the stuff that we think will just keep this a little bit longer or make me a little bit more like this or like that, or you, of course, or the situation. When we're tired of all that manipulating to try to find pleasant reality or unpleasant reality, whatever it is, that then things, and not things as they are, first and foremost. That's what I'm talking about, not whether things should be different or not. Don't get me wrong. But when you can evaluate clearly what's here, as in a good kind of evaluation, not judgment, right? Like discerning kind of evaluation. When you do not want to do it, that is the warning sign. This is back to practice now. It is like having a toothache when your teeth are not so good. When you feel some pain in your teeth, you go to the dentist. That is our way. When you have pain, it's a sign that something needs to be pay attention to, that there's a suffering here that needs your attention, not your running away or denying or manipulation of it. The cause of conflict is some fixed idea or a one-sided idea. When everyone knows the value of pure practice, we will have little conflict in our world. This is a secret of our practice in Dogen Zenji's way. Dogen repeats this point in his book Shobo Genzo, The Treasury of the True Dharma, sometimes the True Dharma Eye. So fixed idea, idealized self or situation, or one-sided idea. This way, not any other way. No, it's not even about dualism. It's just having a fixed idea. So inclusiveness is part of this. And what is the vastness of the sky? What really in the way, well, one way of, I take that back. One way of understanding blue sky meditation is knowing that the field of awareness is all inclusive. Everything is allowable and held. What you want, what you do with it, that's the skillfulness of how to respond comes when we're able to be with things as they are first and foremost. True, we have to know what it is before we can find ways to work with it. And the more we actually know, the more we can more appropriately respond. If you understand the cause of conflicts as some fixed or one-sided idea, in a conflict in an intimate relationship, again, when do we have conflict? When one side thinks they're right and the other side is wrong, as opposed to an inclusive, when we're able to take in both or many points of views or feelings or whatever it is. Otherwise, there's conflict. We don't have to agree, mind you, but the conflict is, no, my way, not your way. Right? I think that's a major part of conflict. So only when somebody's fixed idea or a one-sided idea. If you understand the cause of conflict as some fixed or one-sided idea, you can find meaning in various practices without being caught by any of them. If you do not realize this point, you will be easily caught by some particular way, and you will say, this is enlightenment. This is perfect practice. This is our way. The rest of the ways are not perfect. This is the best way, end quote. So that's a fixed idea. Now, interestingly, at the above paragraph, 2 paragraph above, he says, when you feel some pain in your teeth, you go to the dentist. That is our way. But the difference here is that you say this is the only way. And of course, sometimes you have to say, this is the only way for now, or this is the only way as something I'm willing to try out. And it doesn't say, you can't say, have conviction, mind you. It's just when you say, this is the way it should be for everybody, or it should be for you. So again, our practice is mostly for us, our work, at least. This is a big mistake. There is no particular way in true practice. See, this is very Zen. We say, this is the way it is. This is Zen, this is Zen, this is Zen. And then we say, but there's no particular way. Because we don't, a huge part of Zen is we don't hang on to dogma. We can have ideas, we can have conviction, we can have philosophy, but they're all skillful means, right? That's what they mean when they say, when you see the Buddha, kill the Buddha. We have some fixed idea of who Buddha should be, then you are solidifying around it and you're holding some kind of dogma. There's no particular way in true practice. You should find your own way, and you should know what kind of practice you have right now. Do you know what kind of practice you have right now, and now, and now, and now, and now, on or off the cushion? Most of us don't. Knowing both the advantages and disadvantages of some special practice, you can practice that special way without danger. Right? So we practice, it's useful here to know what are useful in certain practices and not what they're used for, right? So it's not, he's not saying there shouldn't be, sometimes you hear and sometimes it is said that Zen has no methodology, but you have to know what methodology are, and you have to be able to use them to respond appropriately. But again, depending on causes and conditions. But if you have a one-sided attitude, you will ignore the disadvantage of the practice, emphasizing only its good part. Eventually, you will discover the worst side of the practice and become discouraged when it is too late. I'll read that again. Knowing both the advantages and disadvantages of some special practice, you can practice that special way without danger. But if you have a one-sided attitude, you will ignore the disadvantage of the practice, emphasizing only its good part. Eventually, you will discover the worst side of the practice and become discouraged when it's too late. Basically, dogma, when you cling on to something. This is silly. We should be grateful that the ancient teachers point out this mistake. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. Because why? Try it on for yourself. I'm just finger pointing at the moon. I take responsibility for it. And let us discuss it. Not argue if you want, but I don't need to argue. But we can certainly converse about it, including if you disagree, right? I used to say at the end of Dharma talk, I take, what is it I used to say, people? When people push back. But then Deb was like, that's how you let all those white men push back at you. So I stopped saying that. Now I can't even remember what I used to say at the end of Dharma talks, right? So, and in general, my point in that is that everything is up for discussion. Challenges, that's what I used to say. I take challenges. I want you. If you don't understand, and by understand here, I don't mean necessarily just correct information. just ask. That's why PDs, I like you to come with a question. Keep asking, because that's how you keep on building your understanding of how the Dharma really plays out in your life. Otherwise, it's just words from a book or from my mouth. And let's have fun together when we're doing it. That's my thing.